Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review The Vanishing from 2018. So, for some reason, people love lighthouse movies. I don't know what it is. Maybe people may not like Darkness Falls or the original Fog, or I don't know if the remake Fog had a lighthouse in it. As well as me having to bring up the Robert Pattinson, Willem Dafoe bizarrish movie called The Lighthouse, where at some point they just both of them just start to get stir crazy the longer and longer they go and work together, to the point of like Willem Dafoe in that movie barking like a dog, and Robert Pattinson doing a bunch of goofy weird crap too. So it seems that also our characters in this movie like do go a little cabin fever crazy, but there's a whole reason behind that. So, because luckily this movie actually had a story, hence why I'm here talking about it. So, we have James, Donald, and Thomas, who are all to get this boat to make their way to this lighthouse. And so, we have these three men who are kind of to do their regular duties. Yes, I said duty. And he said duty. And they stumble upon this man who had kind of had this little rowboat. And so Donald is to be kind of roped down to get this guy to see if he's still alive and what items, of course, he is to have. They stumble upon this chest, and eventually they go on and figure out this guy is still alive. And what eventually is to turn out with this story being that these three men, Thomas, James, and Donald, are to just think that, oh, like, we can, like, keep this chest and or maybe turn it in and do the right thing. And all of a sudden it seems that the longer and longer these three men are to be holding on to this chest, the more other people start coming for it, and the more interesting things start to break down, where that starts to bring the element of these three men starting to more and more go stir crazy, not because of the chest, but because of all the things that they have done while being like beholden of the chest. So yeah. So with that said, I thought that this movie, I want to say that it's like a very like light, okay film. But it's mostly interesting. It's very long-winded because when we go on and we see a lighthouse movie, we're not expecting us to like have an adrenaline rush of a film. No, we're kind of expecting a slow slog of a film anyway, so we should have been expecting that. And there is some little slivers of interesting stories in here. Like, it's also just kind of interesting seeing Gerard Butler do this kind of film, just because I'm so used to him like doing so many action movies. It's kind of interesting having him just kind of go on and like do a film where like it's a lot of performances and a lot of just kind of seeing him in a different way, even though there is technically some action moments still in this film. But yeah, but still. So yeah. So with that said, where can you conveniently say that you can go out of your way to watch this film? I had caught this movie on Stars, but then I ended up also finding out that it was on Amazon Prime. So if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can go on and watch Vanishing for absolutely free, because a lot of people tend to have a Amazon Prime account anyways. So yeah, so Amazon or Stars, by and large, that's probably where you can go and say that you can watch this film. So, with that said, let's just go into spoilers about this movie, because at the end of the day, I think it's about that time to say it's about that customary time yet again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time to spoil this movie. So let's get into it. So the very beginning of this, we have James, Donald, Thomas. James is to be talking to his wife about a certain amount of money that he is giving her, and that if she ever needs more, just to kind of ask for in advance. So Thomas, James, Donald are all going off onto this boat as kind of things are kind of shifting gears here. Come to find out, Donald is to be seasick, and it's like, well, luckily they're not like boating people, or otherwise this wouldn't make sense. Donald, it seems, is to have in his bag everything that he possesses, and so it's like, well, okay, like I guess this guy is just a nomad, and he's just gonna just kind of go from here to there and here to there, so to speak. So after Donald is to Ralph probably numerous times, and Thomas to mention that the fish will probably love him, they make it to this lighthouse, and it kind of feels like a changing of like a kind of a torch thing has been passed here between Thomas, James, and Donald, and the previous light owner, or the lighthouse keepers. And so the former lighthouse keeper is to mention to Thomas that it seems the lighthouse, some part of the lighthouse is draining mercury, which of course, if you don't know about mercury, like mercury is a lot of like in a lot of like certain like thermometers. It might be like old thermometers, but still. And like mercury is like not something to mess with. As we go on, and we have like these three men in like hazmat suits trying to deal with the mercury at some part of this film. But also, the former lighthouse keeper is to mention to Thomas that also the radio doesn't work. So maybe at some point they can get it working. So Thomas is like, okay, like that's good enough. So so we have at points where like either Thomas or James is like trying to get the radio working, and like they still never really get it to work, but like in some part of the story it'll depend on them trying to get this to work. So we go on, and we have these three guys starting to go on and do their White House duties, where both James and Donald are to consistently just keep like ribbing one another, and like to the point of like Donald trying to put his arms all around James's like stomach to just try to wrestle with him, and James kind of like knocks Donald off. But there is a lot of goofiness had between the two of them. Like we have at one point where they have to go and pick up all these like dead pigeons, and they have to sadly break the wings to try to put them like into the bags. And Donald is to shove one of the dead pigeons into the back of James's coat. Oh my god! I'm like, that's horrible. But I'm sure I'm hoping they were actual pigeons anyways. But then James, to get back at Donald, is to smack this pigeon in Donald's face. Oh my god. So, but yeah, but that happens a little bit later here. The whole pigeon thing, but I just wanted to get that out of the way because that was funny. So James and Donald are cleaning the lighthouse, trying to kind of buff it and everything like that, shifting to make sure that everything is clean with the lighthouse so people can easily see it. We have at one point where James is to fix the foghorn just in case there's to be like a certain time where eventually it's going to get foggy. We consistently have Donald who asks every time like, what is the name for everything and why do you use it? And like Donald is like, well, why do you call it a foghorn? And James is like, because it's a horn for when it gets foggy. And it's like, oh yeah, like, oh, I thought it was some weird, bizarre nickname for everything. And so yeah, so we have James who is to go on and is to use this hook to grab all these crab. And I guess that's kind of an interesting way to like fish. If you go on and you watch the Tom Hanks movie Castaway, like Tom Hanks would have so many of these crabs by this rock, and Tom Hanks would use this like this stick spear to get all this crab and then try to eat it, and go on and mention to Wilson like all about crab, and he's like, crab. But then he goes on to talk about that coconut juice is a natural laxative. Yeah. Anyways, James and Donald. So James is to bring back a number of crabs, and Donald is to mention, it's like, well, hey, like, what do you call the thing that you use to try to get all these crabs? And James is like, well, it's a hook. So Donald is having problems trying to get this crab, and Thomas is to go and show Donald this like kind of roping thing where you keep twisting this rope, and at some point the rope breaks, because in the olden times, I guess they used to use this device to torture people until they would give information, and if the person wasn't giving up information, they would just continue to squeeze till the eyes popped out of their brain. And I'm like, that's a gross visual. But so these guys are enjoying their time together. They're singing songs, and they're like having fun together. And we have Thomas who goes on to light these 3 candles, and is to light them for I'm assuming his family, the family that he lost. And James at some point is to tell Donald about the family that that Thomas had lost, and so at some point Donald is going to talk to him about it, because Donald can't sleep anyway. Now we get to the pigeon part, where all these pigeons are just dead. So they have to go and pick them all up. They put all these pigeons in these bags. And then after that, Donald is to see the guy who's just kind of laying there with this little rowboat. And so Donald, because he's the smallest, and Donald tries to get James to do it, and Thomas is like, no, like, James is like too big. And like, yeah, wouldn't you have James being the one like slogging Donald down there anyways? Like, he's probably like, it looks like he's the most muscular guy. If anything, I would have either Thomas or Donald go. No offense to either one of those guys. I'm sure that they're really ripped and they have like 6-pack abs for days and muscular to the gills, but still, like, that's just, Gerard Butler just looks like the most like bigger guy out of all of them. It might be the clothes. I'm not sure. So James is like roping Donald down as Thomas is helping. So Donald is to make his way down there, is to get to this guy, and so they're checking if he's awake or not, and then they spot this weird wooden chest. And I'm like, oh, there be buried treasure in them hills. So they get the treasure box and they're hoisting it up. And they're like, what is this going to be? While that's going on, all of a sudden, the guy who is with Donald is to wake up and like, and so he starts attacking Donald. And he's like beating the crap out of him and like dunking him into this water. He's like, ma! So We now have Thomas who's like, I'm coming, Donald, as now, like, James is have to rope down Thomas all by himself. And so Thomas is trying to help out, and Donald is now being dunked in this water to where he's drowning at this point. Donald is grabbing this rock to smack into this guy's face, and so Donald is having to smash this guy's head with this rock so much so that he ends up getting killed here. So, like, at first, Thomas is wanting to do the right thing to turn all this stuff in, because at some point, like, how can you hide this story from anybody? And, like, James is kind of like, well, like, should we open this chest? And Thomas is like, no, like, it isn't right. Like, we should just give it to whatever his next of kin is. So, but James and Donald are just so tempted to break open this chest anyways. Come to find out, it's a specific number of blocks of gold or bars of gold that are about the size of your arm, or about the size of like your elbow to your wrist. That's how lengthy they are. Not girthy, but lengthy. Uh, that's what she said. Moving on. So James and Donald are holding this gold and thinking of all the money that they can do with it. And Thomas is like, no, like, I'm sorry, like, if you go on and you guys take this gold, are you really going to be able to keep this secret? Is anybody not going to be able to figure out how drastically you have, like, gone from, like, being this poor guy to now having money that you can just kind of throw away willy-nilly? Willy-nilly isn't what he actually says there, but I paraphrase. So, Thomas, like, at first is really not interested in wanting to go on and keep this gold. But then all of a sudden, like, the longer and longer we go about it, it seems that things change and they all go along with it. So they hide this body. So Donald, like, and this is like the nightfall after. Donald can't sleep, and so he just appears in Thomas's room. While he's sleeping, Thomas just kind of like, wakes up, and Donald is just right there, just like, hey, tell me about your wife and your sons. Like, I'd be like, get the out of my room. Get out of my room. Are you kidding me? You just, like, appear out of nowhere as if some magic. So Thomas is like, yeah, let's go on and let's share some tea together. Because I guess none of these guys can sleep anyways. Because at some point, James is to come on in and just kind of, like, pick up where their conversation ends. So Donald is mentioning at some point that he was to meet up with some girl, and this girl was to have said to Donald that he's some bastard, and now it seemed that Donald could never, like, escape that name from any number of people, and he starts crying about that whole story. But he also can't get the face of that guy that he killed out of his brain. Feels like he's haunted by it. So, but Donald is asked Thomas about his, like, his family, and that he was to have a wife, and he was to have 2 kids for a very brief time, and Donald is like, well, like, what do you mean brief time? And Thomas is to walk off, and James is to finish that story. James, of course, is to mention that Thomas had lost twins during childbirth, and they had both died. And so Donald's like, oh, well, that's too bad. So Thomas is to go and light these candles, consistently for his family that he at some point had. So within this story, the guys don't really talk much about the gold, that they're not wanting to like hold up the gold, but they also don't want to go into prison for being murderers or anything like that also. So they just kind of hide this body, and so come to find out these two men are coming and looking for the guy who of which was dead. So we have Locke and we have Boor. Boor? Boor? I'm gonna go with Boor. Boor. Boor? Cool. So we have these two men having their boat and are making their way to this lighthouse. And Thomas is to go up there and want to talk to them first. And Thomas is telling both James and Donald to stick back while he's to go on and kind of like tell them this story, this tale. So Thomas goes and meets up with these two men, and of course we have Locke who's doing most of the talking here, as Boor is just this kind of big guy that's very intimidating and like he's a lot of that. He's Locke is going on and mentioning about the man that had gone missing that they know full well about. And so Thomas is mentioning, oh yeah, that guy's dead. That guy's dead, and whatever that guy had was seized by some people. And so yeah, like we obviously don't have those items anymore. So like, too bad, so sad. So Locke is now going on, and he's not really sure if he can believe this story. And so he's like, well, do you have other people working with you? And Thomas is like, well, yeah, two other men. And Locke is like, well, could I speak to them? And Thomas is like, well, they're working. And then right after he says that, both of the guys like start like coming down, wanting to like see what these guys have to say. And so Locke starts like asking these two other men, and it seems that consistently, when Locke is to ask the two other men, both Donald and James, questions, a lot of times they're just referring to whatever Thomas is to say. And so also we had Locke who was to ask, like, well, hey, like, how exactly did you guys go on and like get anybody to come down here? And Thomas is like, well, we radioed. It's like, okay, all right. Like, well, we'll be seeing ya. So Locke and Boor go back onto their boat, and Thomas is telling James to quickly get the radio ready and try to fix it. So both Thomas and James are trying to quickly fix this radio, and Locke and Boor are trying to use this radio to call them, and it seems the radio isn't working perfectly for them to respond. So they're like, you liars. So you traitors. So Locke and Boor are to now come back as Donald is watching on as these guys are to make it back here. All three of the lighthouse keepers are back where these guys are, and they're shooting off these flares because they have no guns. And so they're shooting off these flares, and like it gets to where like all three of these guys are just kind of watching on to see what these two men in this boat will do. So it starts to become nightfall, and so like they can't quite see things as well as because nightfall. So Boor and Locke are to get out of their boat and make their way close to this White House and catch these three men by surprise. Going on and have Boor knocking James out with this piece of log or wood or a stiffy whiffy, called Wood. So Bohr had knocked out James and had gone on to make it back in the lighthouse. Locke is already in the lighthouse as Thomas is to stumble upon Locke, who is in this dining slash kitchen room. So Thomas and Locke are, of course, like kind of fighting it out, but then Bohr comes in and like kind of things are kind of evened up here. All of a sudden Thomas comes in, or Thomas comes in. Donald comes in and is fighting with Bohr, but Bohr takes out Donald, and now Locke and Bohr are torturing Thomas, putting a knife in his leg. Like, where's the chest? Where is it? Where is it? Like, they weirdly just consistently have their heads like smashed against one another, and I'm like, what is going on here? Tell me where the treasure is. That's kind of what happens in this movie. We have a lot of head smushing for some reason. Tell me where it is. Okay, sure. All right. I give. I'm tapping out. So we have James that comes back in, and he is to go on and like try to choke Bohr, as we now have Donald who gets up and is to use that small rope from that crab before to now like take this rope on Locke's head and is to start to squeeze and tighten till we have Locke's head who busts, who kind of just breaks, and we start to see blood fall. And we have James who's choking out Bohr, and then he starts banging his head against this floor as if it's like the scene from like superhero movie where we have like the mantis guy from that movie who goes on and is like saving the damsel in distress in that movie, and then he's like bashing the guy's head against the ground, and then he looks at the girl and he's like, yeah. Not as the comedic thing of that, but like we go and we have like Gerard Butler banging this guy's head against the ground, and then he realizes like, oh, this guy's probably dead now, and then he's like, oh, okay, I'll just stop. Good grief, this fight scene, this fighting it out. So now that these people have gone on and killed so many people at this point, realizing that everyone's hands are bloody. And especially when Thomas is to wake up, he'll find that there seems to be more blood upon his face, that he is to go on and have to kind of clean off a little bit. Because when he wakes up the next day, he's realized that like his like pillow and his face is just bloody and just a mess because he was in a fight. He was brutal and so on and so forth. So Thomas is to wake up the next day, and James is... who is, of course, if I didn't say already, this is Gerard Butler's character. James is to take all the dead bodies and stack them all, and to try to keep everything neat and tidy like Thomas likes it to be. And Thomas is just like, okay. So we start to slowly but surely see that James, from all the bloodshed and all the things that they had to do recently, James is slowly but surely losing his f***ing mind. James is going and he's like starting to like make these things of food at some point, and Donald is to have a spoonful at some point and eat stuff and so on and so forth. So but James is at some point just getting very upset with Donald, and the more and more they have some exchanges of words, and this continues to escalate to where Thomas has to separate them both because they are to almost just want to be at each other's throats. to the point where to where James is to go off and is to just sleep in this church and is to blame Donald for everything that had happened to them, and is mentioning that Donald is a rat, and like none of this would have happened if it weren't for Donald. So so we have these two, like, almost like we have James who's like death threatening Donald, and so we have James, Thomas, and Donald who are to all go on and start shoving these bodies off to the side of the boat. We also had a moment where James, after they were going to go on and kill those two other men, they spot some younger guy outside in this looking out this window, and so all three of the lighthouse keepers try to chase him down, and James is to kill this younger guy with this hook. James is to look at him, and he is to see that this is a kid, and it looks like a guy named Charlie, who I guess is to look like his son. And James is starting to weep because of just killing a young kid because they didn't know. At this point, it just becomes like just the urge to kill just becomes too great. So they just start dumping all these bodies off to the side, but James is to take a real moment and like really just take his time kind of dumping this kid off to the side. So James at some point is to go off trying to look for Crab for food, and Thomas makes his way to see James, and Thomas is asking James, like, hey, caught any good crab today? And James is saying, like, yeah, I've caught plenty. Thomas looks at the bucket and is to see that it's empty. James is all of a sudden talking about his wife and his children, and James is saying that he doesn't think that his relationship with his wife is working out, and that his children are just like faceless people to him. And Thomas is telling James, is like, well, hey, like, it'll come back, like uh you just need some time, like you just. And James is like, no, I don't think I do. James is going on and fixing some things for the lighthouse, and he's talking to himself inside the light part of the lighthouse. Thomas is to walk in on James talking to himself, and Thomas is like, okay, I didn't see anything. I'm just gonna walk back down. Hey, like, hey, yeah, like, I'm just gonna get out of here. So we have James, Thomas, and Donald, who at some point are to all just sit down at this table together, and we're thinking that everything is back to normal, everything is copacetic. It seems that all three of them had all gone on, and like it seems like they're all back to normal, and it seems that we're fine at this point. But then all of a sudden, James is going with Thomas into this room, and James locks the door for Thomas to not be able to get out. Then James goes on and somehow is to kill Donald. And when James finally does open this door, he just sees James and Donald now dead. So here's another body that they have to somehow get rid of. So Thomas and James are to go on this boat again, dump off this body, and James is telling Thomas that he wants to get dumped off as well. He wants to die as well. And Thomas is like, no, like, think of your family, like, think of your kids. Thomas is just like, no, like I want to do this. And Thomas is just like, There's no convincing James. So James drops himself into the water, telling Thomas that he's the only one that can be able to live with this story that they are to have. Like, and I'm thinking, like, what happened with the gold? It seemed like, did they dump the gold off to the side? It just seems like the gold is like an all forgotten thing. You would have thought they would have tried to like figure out how to use that gold at some point, but it seems like the gold is a forgotten thing. So James, it seems, is to try to put himself underwater. But then he pops his head back up, and James is calling for Thomas. Thomas goes over, and now Thomas has to be forced to shove James's head in the water for him to drown. And after that, Thomas is just standing on this boat, and he's just like, he has this expression of F my life. Just F my life. And he's just on this boat just going like, yeah, like this is what my life has come to, death. So for how many people have died within his family and now dealing with all of this, Thomas at some point was to try to relit those candles, but then as soon as he tries to do it, he like knocks them down. And this is kind of before the whole like end of him being on this boat, just kind of going on and just like wanting to forget all of this. So with that said, that is to wrap up this review. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about The Vanishing. Very slow slog of a film. And I didn't know exactly how I absolutely felt about this film. I thought that it was just okay enough. But yeah, it's like one of those stories where you're just like, I can't believe all of this has happened. And like the way it just kind of ends off with like all three of these guys just losing their minds, going into like stir craziness and getting to the point of wanting to just figure out a way to just start, like, once they've killed, I guess they just can't go back. So with that said, I think I'm going to go out of my way to just get out of here so I can go on and review something else. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.